It's Bill Krackenberger and Rosalie Michaels on the Wisecrack Sports Betting Podcast by WSN.com.
Hey everyone, welcome to episode 7 of Wisecracks. We're happy to be back with you. I'm Rosalie Michaels and I got my buddy Bill Krackenberger, or as I like to call him, Krack. What's happening with you this week?
Hey, good. No, not much, Rosalie. Looking forward to getting back in the swing of things with baseball.
I see what you did there.
That was just spontaneous. Yeah.
Oh,
So,
knocked it out of the park
looking forward to sports. I know, more for financially things you think. However, I want to tell you something. For people's, including myself, our mental state, we really need to watch some sports on TV and just to get some sports going. And like I said, it's an internal thing. We haven't seen nothing going on here for 4 or 5 months except for golf and maybe a little bit of UFC or NASCAR, which I really could take or leave the last two. So looking forward to seeing some baseball this weekend.
Yeah, I've been seeing that a lot on Twitter. People are just aching for their sports. And it's interesting to see how much sports really does, like you said, lend to the mindset of at least the American public, right? So,
Of course.
yeah, I've been watching F1, which I'm a huge F1 fan. And normally it's every other weekend. And right now they're doing like every weekend. So it's been fun to at least have that to watch on the weekends.
I looked this past weekend, the Yankees and Mets were on ESPN on Saturday night. I think it was Saturday or Sunday night, one of the two nights. It was so cool watching a baseball game, even though it's a preseason game. But it was so cool seeing these guys out there and hearing listen, there's no fans. I understand that. They put these cardboard cutouts in back of the screen. Kind of cool. They're like, I think you had to rent them if you wanted to. If you're a fan, you could pay $200 and get your face in a cardboard cutout in back of the umpire there. And also they had the sights, not only the sights, they had the sounds of the game. There were some noises that are going to be generated throughout the microphones and the speakers and stuff. So it's pretty cool hearing, like, when a home run is hit, there is some cheering and stuff. So
that's cool.
It makes the fans feel good at home, but maybe it actually helps the players too, or even the pitchers. It could affect a little bit. So we'll see what happens.
Absolutely. I'm wondering, I need to talk to some of these guys and see how it is affecting them, because in F1 they do the same thing. They've got the digital billboards and they've got people can tweet in. You see a driver from last year and like that is rooting for the guys and stuff. So I wonder if when the NFL picks up again too, if we see those big digital billboards as well with fan interaction. I think that's a great idea. All right, well, let's get into what we got going on today, because there's a lot of excitement around, because we got baseball starting up tomorrow. People are psyched, and I know you are too, right, Krack?
Yes, it's going to be it's interesting too. You have to think about this season is going to be different than any other season, of course, and you have to start out hot. Only 60 games. So even though, like the Washington Nationals, the World Series champions last year, even them, they started out 19-31. If that happens, they're clearly going to miss the playoffs this year. So.
Yeah, you got. So everybody's going to be bringing their A game, including the sports bettors need to as well. So we'll get deeper into that and how to manage that this year, especially. And then, of course, after strategy, we have our guest segment, which has been a very, very popular time. And you guys are going to be excited because we have sports betting podcast pioneer Gill Alexander with us. I feel so lucky to have him on the show. And I think he'll have a really interesting perspective on everything going on right now. And you guys have similar kind of mindsets, don't you, Krack?
Well, I'll just tell you, Gill, not only being one of my really good friends, he is one of the smartest people on sports talk radio, and not only sports betting radio, sports talk radio.
Wow.
He is very well versed and very well schooled in this industry. I am really happy to have him on.
One of the smartest people. There's a note for you. That's a big compliment coming from Krack. All right. And then, of course, after that, we get to Krack's pick for this week. And then we answer some Twitter questions, which we love from our viewers. So on that note, make sure to tweet your questions to us at WSN Sports, at Rosalie Michaels, at Bill Crackman, and we'll choose our favorites to answer on next week's show. So, oh, and make sure to use the hashtag #WiseCracks to make sure that we see your questions. You can also leave your questions in the YouTube comments. And while you're there, make sure to like and subscribe to our channel so that you don't miss an episode of Wisecracks. All right, so we are covering this week. This is it. We're talking about betting on one of the big pro leagues this week. Baseball is back.
That's right. Baseball's back.
It's crazy. It feels good to actually say
that. It does
that.
feel good. It feels good to yell and scream and let out some of that misplaced rage that I have too.
Misplaced? I think it's perfectly placed. All right. So yeah, I mean, Major League Baseball, this is a big, big subject, right, Krack? There's a lot of ground to cover here.
Yes. I mean, we could do hours on this, especially this year with all these different rule changes and what's been going on with the whole pandemic and these baseball guys and injuries and stuff and people sitting out some major names have been sitting out and stuff. So yeah, it's definitely
a different type of season this year, but it makes it fun, it makes it interesting, and maybe it gives us a little bit of an edge. So let's get into it. So I was reading the article you posted on Krack Wins, and you said you bet more totals than sides in baseball. So that's a great place for us to start. So what are some of the reasons why you like totals?
So traditionally in every sport, I weigh totals more than I weigh sides. This doesn't change for baseball. Over my last 25 plus years, I have always had more successful betting when I bet totals. That's not just baseball. Like I said, it's NCAA, basketball, football. I play totals at a higher percentage too of my bankroll than I do sides.
Okay.
Totals traditionally stay closer to the mean than the sides do.
So we'll get a little bit more into that because I do have a follow-up question, but I want to talk about the factors that you look at when you're looking at totals, because that's what's going to make the decision on which one you're going with. So I'm going to go through them one by one, and I want to dig into it a little bit. So
okay.
Obviously the biggest one is the starting pitcher matchup, right? So what are you looking for, and will that change this season because of the shortened season?
Well, baseball, more than any other sport, is a sport of streaks. The batters and pitchers both go through some crazy periods of up and downs. It really is more important to look at these starting pitchers, their last few starts, and how they performed during those outings. Is the pitcher having a hard time finding the plate lately, or does he just seem to be in a groove? One important change to this shortened season is that I will absolutely not have to worry about season inning fatigue. Now, what that means is towards the end of the season, sometimes when they go over the 200 inning mark, there is some fatigue in these pitchers, even the star pitchers. But with a 60-game schedule like this year, I don't think I'm going to have to worry about that factor as much.
So let's talk about weather. So what are some of the ways that can affect the total bets?
Well, weather actually affects football more than any other sport because it's an outdoor sport. So if people see snow or rain, automatically they say, "Oh my God, no scoring, bet under." It's actually like I said before in a previous podcast, that's not even true. So the wind is what matters more. And speaking of wind, the only couple baseball stadiums it really affects is a place like Chicago, Wrigley Field. As a matter of fact, they don't even put the lineup on the totals until sometimes a few hours before the game. That's how fickly the weather could be, so crazy there, going all different ways. So what I look for a game like Chicago, or even the Yankee Stadium too, has some weather that's sometimes a little crazy. Okay. So you have to check right before game time. I would wait later until before game time if you're betting on those totals. So only a couple parks. There's unbelievable situations in Wrigley where if the wind is blowing out, the total will be 10.5. That same exact game, same setup. If the wind's blowing in, it'll be 8.5. So they'll literally take 2 full runs off the total betting wise. So look out for that and look to bet a little bit later if you're betting those particular teams.
Okay, so with that being said, so is that something you go towards depending on what the line is, or is it something you stay away from?
No, I actually will. If I get that information first about the weather, which I have a guy that's on top of that stuff. We will send that out as a play, and I'll actually bet it myself, knowing I'm going to get the best of the line, right away. So.
Gotcha. All right. So this is something that's pretty interesting, which I think it may be only in baseball, but correct me if I'm wrong. So you talk about that the plate umpire is also a big factor. Like I don't think you see that in any other sport, right? Where the refereeing, the maintenance of the game comes into play. But you say the plate umpire is a big factor. Tell me why.
Well, that's not a giant factor, but it is a factor.
Okay.
Every umpire is different. So their strike zone is different. And I mean by that, where they call balls and strikes sometimes. And, that sometimes can help a pitcher, unders or overs, the totals. Some of these guys have wider strike zone margins than others. So it's good to know the tendency of a certain umpire. These crews are announced literally before the start of a series, and they follow a standard rotation also. Each guy will get a chance to be behind the plate. So, like I said, and also some umpires have a little bit of a bias when calling balls and strikes at a home field. Believe it or not, they do have a little bit of a bias. And listen, they're professionals. They're under pressure, and they're taught to be very well and keep their emotions under pressure. They're going to be yelled at during the game. Almost every single game, someone's questioning the umpire.
Every time.
But this season is going to be a little different, without a crowd influence around. But I guess we'll have to see if they're influenced by the fake fan noise at the stadiums this year,
or the lack of the heckling, right? It's going to be interesting. So, okay, is there any other sport where you kind of take into again the refereeing or the maintenance of the game, like you do?
I think baseball, because baseball being so close to the. Listen, I remember myself sitting at Yankee Stadium on first base. Don Mattingly was on first, and I remember yelling at an umpire and Mattingly cracking up laughing. Well, I don't think that can happen in any other sport. No, I shouldn't say any other sport. It can't happen in a football game where it's so loud. It could happen in the NBA. If you have a seat around the court in the NBA yelling at the referee or something, that could happen. But then you also, you actually can get threatened with an eviction. And I've seen people thrown out of certain games, fans being thrown out for constant heckling.
Wow. Yeah. When I had season tickets to the NFL, there were times where I wanted to throw some fans out.
Right.
So that's all really interesting information. So where can someone go? Do you have any kind of tips on how to find out this information about the weather, about the umpire, and what kind of tendencies he has?
Well,
how can I do my own research?
20 years ago, it was actually very difficult, or it's much harder than it is today to find out information on weather on the stadium. There's great weather apps. Today, there's plenty of sites online that provide information. You can actually find out the umpires instantly when they announce them. So there are a simple Google search or something like that. You can find out current weather or umpire statistics. Even umpire statistics are out there. That was never out there till recently.
Wow.
So, yeah, the key statistics you really want to look for is the average, the runs per game. You can get really technical here over the strike ball percentage. Obviously, the higher strike percentage and the lower ball percentage is more where the under over should be rated. So, and same thing with the wind. You want to look at you could check the wind in these parks. There's certain parks that play differently, like I said earlier. But even like a place like Colorado, you have to see what's going on there too. With Colorado, that the elevation level is very tough for a couple of these teams with maybe these rookies or new guys to play at. So see what happens. You can just do your own research.
Yeah, that's, I think that probably people who play fantasy, I know with fantasy football, with what I do and fantasy baseball, my mom was a huge fantasy baseball player. It's you do all that research into it. You find out who plays well on turf, who plays well on, grass, who, it's all that sort of stuff. And there's sites out there that you can go and get all that information from, right?
Correct.
Got it. So, okay. So let's talk about a couple other concepts that I want to explore a little bit more about total bets. So you talk a lot about key numbers in different sports. So how does that apply to your approach to totals?
Well, it would apply to the only really thing you have to realize is you have to line shop. Going back to our old podcast,
Oh,
listen,
yes.
you have to line shop here.
Okay.
Baseball is a game that easily can land 5-4, 4-3, because if it's 4-4 extra innings, especially with the new rule this year, starting out with a man on second, all it takes is a little hit there to get the guy to come home and score, and it'll go on that odd number. So if I'm looking to let's talk about this. When I'm line shopping, and if I'm betting over, let's say over the total of 9, I want to look for over the total of 8.5. If I want to bet over 6.5, I want to look for the total. I'm sorry, if I want to bet over 7, I'm looking for over 6.5, because it's worth it to lay a little more juice than you're going to. Like a perfect example is, let's use the 9. If you lay over 8.5, you're going to have to lay $1.25 compared to over 9 minus $1.10. I think it's worth it going over the 8.5, laying that extra juice. But then again, just line shop. You may find over 8.5 laying $1.20 rather than over 9 with just one sports book laying $1.10 or $1.05.
So it's really a combo action that you need to take a look at there, right?
Yes, if you're betting totals, you definitely want to do some shopping, because there is going to be some different totals this year, especially from what I'm looking at and from what I've read.
Okay. And of course, you guys can go back if you missed that whole podcast on online shopping. It was a great one. We had a great guest that week too. And so if you missed that, you can go back in our YouTube channel and see that as well, because that was really, really good information. All right. So I know you're not huge in baseball when it comes to betting sides, which is betting on which team is going to win. So, but you say normally stay away from big favorites, but this season especially, right? Can you expand on that and
Sure.
recommend that approach for other people?
Well, that's not to say that I don't bet sides, because I actually do bet baseball sides every day.
Okay.
I just won't lay over a certain amount. It's an old school adage. Years ago, you would never lay over $1.40 on a baseball favorite. Well, that has changed a little bit over the last couple of years, and you have to adapt. You can actually lay up to 160. Very rarely will I lay over it. I think I laid over one. I think I laid 180 maybe once last year. I just don't like betting these big favorites. I stick to more of the underdogs, or I stick to more of the lower favorites in baseball. And I think even this year that may even play more true, because there's some different rules this year where if you're going to bet at certain sport, you're going to bet. It's an action bet only. You can't list pitchers. So if there is a pitching change, which doesn't really happen too much, but it does happen maybe once a week, twice a week, there is a pitching change. After you bet your bet, this year you're out of luck. It's an action wager. So if you're laying $1.80 on a game and a pitcher comes in, that's a pick'em game laying $1.10, you're still laying the $1.80. So this benefits the underdog bettors more than it does the favorite bettors.
Got it. So, okay. So we've talked about the overs, over under the totals, and we've talked about the sides. So are there any other smart ways to bet on Major League Baseball? Do we do prop bets? Do we do live bets? Anything like that?
Well, you could bet some live wagering. Sure. Live wagering is very big. Again, only bet during commercials out there,
Oh,
folks.
that's right.
Yeah, only bet during the commercials. But live wagering is definitely a way to get down. I don't really bet too much on props, but I do know that there are some sharp syndicates out there that have over under. Will a team, get a score run in the first inning? That's an interesting way to bet, but only certain sports books offer those type of props. So I just stick to mostly the sides and the totals, more totals. There is also run lines where you can lay a run and a half or take a run and a half on a game, but you're going to pay, or you're going to pay premiums to take a run and a half, and you're going to when you lay a run and a half, it's the opposite. You actually take some money back. But I really don't bet too many run lines, hardly ever. A lot of people love betting run lines on big giant favorites. I think no way. I don't think that's the way to bet baseball, but yet some people do.
So you can get lucky maybe sometimes, but it's not a good solid betting strategy, is what you're saying.
Sure. I mean, the worst thing to do is win a game 5-4, and you lose the game because you laid a run and a half. Yeah.
that would stink, no doubt about it. So okay, so the last thing that I want to talk about, because this is looming large on us, this is a different season this year. So, Crack, let's talk about some of the rule changes for this year and how that's going to affect both the game and the way you bet on it. So tell me some of the rule changes that are sticking out to in your mind.
I'll use the big three. Let's use the big three rule changes. One, there's a
Okay.
60-game season. It's shortened from 162 games. Two, it's the man on second rule in extra innings, where they just want to get they want to get the game over and get these teams back in the locker rooms. And three, a relief pitcher has to face a minimum of 3 batters. Let's go backwards. Let's start with the relief pitcher.
Okay.
The relief pitcher normally in a tight game or something, or in a situation where you don't want to get that run scored, the manager will come out in the dugout and he'll call in a lefty versus a lefty, just to get him in there and get that one batter out. And now they'll take the pitcher right out after he gets that batter out. It's a little bit different this year. You have to face the 3 batters. You can't bring a pitcher in for just that one batter. So that's first. And secondly, the man on second, they just want, so now think about it. The rule is also they go back to the last inning to put someone on second base. Whoever made the last outs, the guy before him, goes on second base. And, it depends on who is speedy in your lineup. There may be some strategy here where, you may want to start an inning out, or, maybe your second guy or third guy that comes up, depending on the situation, is a speedy guy. So, because you're going to start out with him as long as the next inning on second base. And going back to the 60-game season, that is the biggest rule change. You have to get out there real quick. You can't be getting into no slow streaks this year. You have to get out there and you have to win. It's so important not to get into a slump. So there's 3 good things.
Those are big, because baseball teams, their strategy has to be different this year. They're going to come out, like you said, guns a-blazing. There's no ramp up time. There's no, hey, let's see if this works kind of thing and get the kinks out over here. It's boom, win some games, keep winning games. There's no,
usually it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah.
This is different. This is a sprint. You have to get out there and you can't start with a slow record, or you can't start with a slump. You really have to focus on winning games, and there's no fooling around this year. We really have to get off the schneid, in other words.
Wow. Well, yeah. So those 3 things definitely going to affect, and it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out in these first couple of weeks, to see what happens with the betting lines and things like that as the season moves on. So obviously, I want to let you guys know too, if you have more questions about betting on Major League Baseball, WSN.com, we have a ton of great content out there. And there's a great blog all about the ins and outs of Major League Baseball betting, so that you can read through that and see all the different angles you can take. And of course, hearing Bill's advice to go along with that, so that you guys can keep winning on this new interesting Major League Baseball season.
Yeah, this morning I was reading about that, Rose. I was reading what we had up there at WSN. There's some interesting articles. I read one about someone that's actually maybe going against the Dodgers, and I liked the article that I read on WSN on that. There's some really good articles. Not just that one. There's a couple different ones on strategy for baseball, and also other sports too. So take a look WSN.com.
Yeah, lots of good information up there. And if you are new to betting on baseball, you're really going to get a nice education there. So that is pretty intense for our strategy session, wouldn't you say?
Good stuff. Good stuff.
So at WSN, we are all about the free content. We've got those super comprehensive guides that we just told you about. There's also a video crash course on that page if you want to get the most important tips quickly. And of course, you can always check out Krack's Guide to Baseball Betting, up right now on crackwins.com. And if you don't already have the Crackwins app, I mean, you know what? The wait is over. Sports are back, and Crackwins is ready to roll. Major League Baseball is here, NBA right behind it. So sign up now and you get to take advantage of all the early opportunities in the market and get the best odds on Crackwins futures bets before the season starts. So you want that advantage in your pocket. So download that Crackwins app. So we've got a great guest today, an amazing one, some would say. Gill Alexander is the host of Beating the Book, which he started, over a decade ago. And he literally pioneered the world of sports betting podcasts. So he opened the door for us here at Wisecracks. He's also the host of A Numbers Game on the VSiN network. So we're excited to talk to him. So let's check it out, our conversation with him from earlier. Hey, Gill, thanks so much for joining us. We're excited to have you.
Thank you, Rosalie. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Now, I know you and Bill go back a long way. You guys have been doing this sports betting podcast thing for quite a while, huh?
Yeah, we have been. And may I say that from day one, he has been the greatest guy ever. He is exactly as he appears.
Oh, thank you, Gill. And, I was saying, you probably don't know this. You're going to know it now. I remember I was doing some ESPN interviews for ESPN.com and Chad Millman and stuff, but I'll tell you what, I think you were one of the first, if not the first podcast I ever did was yours. And that is, I don't know if it's archived somewhere, but that it is. That's one of the best interviews I ever. I remember pulling over. I was like in the Orleans parking lot and I talked to you for like an hour and I just kind of was giving you the state of the state there. And
yeah. It was one of those days where you were not at your happiest, as I recall. It was fascinating. Yeah.
So
let's get some B-roll of that and throw that.
Yeah, that was it was literally 10 years ago. I mean, something like that, 8 years ago.
It was like 8 or 9 years ago. Yeah.
Hey, Gill, this big ruling came out yesterday from the gaming board, Nevada Gaming, and of course they ruled with the casino. And I say, of course, because that's the way of many of us that were in the know kind of thought it was going to go that way. I still don't know officially, not being on Twitter the last since yesterday that much. So what is your take on this? And also, is MGM getting fined at all, or they're just the gaming board just agreed with them and not even like no slap on the wrist for the MGM Corporation?
I wish I knew the answer to that, Bill and Rosalie. Okay. I wish I knew the answer to that. I don't, because I, like you, I'm sort of checked out here. I'm on vacation, so I haven't gotten the details on it. But when you and I spoke about this 2 weeks ago, you were pretty much dead on that this, and for those who don't know the details, again, it was the past posting of a bet. Guys knew that these games had started. They threw in some bets. They were very aggressive, which I think to me is the key detail, right? They were super aggressive about their bets. They made parlays involving games that had already started in Korea. I think one game was in China as well, but most of them were in Korea, baseball games. And they made six figures and were very brash about it, posting it on Twitter, I believe. Hey, look how much I won. And I think had they not been so aggressive, had they not been so brash, if it were just a few $1,000s, then it would have just been a situation where MGM was like, you know what? You take the money, you don't get to bet here anymore, or you don't take it, we just act like this never happened. But because it was so much,
they got too greedy. They got too greedy.
Really. You called it, yeah.
They were vocal, right?
They were what?
They were vocal. They were bragging about it.
Oh yes, they were. I'm sure they went back into the poker room and they wanted to, a pat on the back and to tell their buddies, look what I just did. These games were already in the 5th inning, already in the 6th inning. So yes, you're right. They were a little bit too vocal about it, and they probably ruined it for themselves. So, but Gill and I believe, Gill, right? We really kind of had MGM's, not that we had their back, but we were on the side of you guys were too greedy and they shouldn't play.
And Lord knows we're not always or often on the sportsbook side, but I think we were in this case. But you bring up a good point though. Like, should MGM get fined for this? That'll be interesting to see because you're not supposed to take a bet past post.
Right.
So we'll see.
Right. I'm sure that will come down. I just didn't know if it did yet or not. But the ruling was, and it's probably because of that one ticket. I don't know if you know this, Rosalie, to tell you too. So these guys not only bet straight bets to win $500 and $300, they bet like Gill said, round robins and parlays. One guy, I think the one was $130-some thousand. Wow. I mean, of course they're not going to pay you $130-some thousand. I mean, it was a pure shot, and I hate to say, gambling Twitter, of course, these guys that are on Twitter, a lot of them don't agree with it, but they're hiding under, not that they're hiding, but they're under anonymity where Gill and I are posting under our names and faces. And we just, even if I was, I'm just going to tell you, I thought it was they got a little bit too greedy. And if they would have kept it to a smaller amount just to sweep it under a rug, I'm sure MGM would have paid them.
Oh, and I'll even add one last thing. If it were a smaller amount, MGM may not even have noticed it.
Yeah.
Right? If it was only a few $100, they may have just been like, oh, well, we lost a bet.
Yeah.
Right. And there's, they could have done, they could have went undercover and made multiple $100 and $200 and $500 bets, but instead, this is the way they choose to go, and they're being penalized for it.
So that my understanding with the ruling is that they're not paying any outstanding tickets. So obviously tickets that have already been paid out, that's just a loss, right?
I don't know if they were even paid out because these were made between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m. in the morning. So I know that the sports book itself wasn't open at the counter. I don't know if they have a machine there because this is a new way. This is new for Las Vegas. These kiosks where you can make bets, it's more. New Jersey has them all over the place. So, however, it's pretty new for Nevada. I didn't even know they had it at MGM. I know South Point where we do Visa, and they have it there. But so this is a new thing for even us. So I don't think anyone got paid. I don't think anyone was able to actually cash their tickets and get paid, as far as I know.
All right. Well, interesting. We'll keep an eye on everything going on with that. But let's talk some more about baseball, but let's talk about MLB. Now, Gill, I was talking with Krack earlier, and we were talking about betting baseball and the new parameters that are happening right now. This is a different baseball world than what we're used to living in. So are you modifying the way that you're betting this baseball season?
I think you do have to modify it. I think you have to figure out, first of all, from a 162 game schedule down to a 60 game schedule, the randomness of baseball in any full regular season in a typical year is such that there are going to be big periods of time where even the best teams do poorly and the worst teams have this stretch where they do well. So when you reduce it, but the beauty of betting baseball over a course of the season, the reason why season win totals typically over 162 games is so great is you can overcome that negative variance based on what your handicap was to begin the season on any specific team, good or bad. When it's 60 games, I mean, you could have a team like, I won't go as far as saying the Orioles or the Tigers, maybe not that bad, but you could have a team like the Toronto Blue Jays really credibly compete for the division. You really could, because they have enough hitting where they could get hot from the beginning with all these young guys, and the pitching could just somehow hold up for that. It's only 2 months of baseball, 66 days. So you have to modify it with randomness. Like you have to accept that randomness is going to happen. And then on a daily basis, and I'm sure Bill has much to say about this. I haven't had a chance to talk about it on my show at VSiN because I've been away, but the notion that there are no listed pitchers anymore. Some of us who bet in faraway places for a couple years now, we've been familiar with this. It's just action. You're not listing pitchers. But for 5 inning plays, first 5, they were listing pitchers. Now they're not even doing that. They're not doing that in Vegas at all. So the thought of betting big favorites without really much second thought, the thought of betting run line favorites, the thought of betting unders, because good pitchers are involved. You got to really kind of think twice now and say, what if those guys get scratched? I'm going to be screwed. So there's all kinds of ways to me that a baseball bettor has to adjust this year.
Yeah, we've hit on this earlier. Exactly that. What would you think, Gill? Maybe like once a week is a pitcher scratched from a lineup. So it should affect maybe 10 games throughout the year, 15, 20 games throughout the year. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's so hard. That's a great point. Like, how often will that actually happen? Will it happen a lot? Will it happen seldomly? The bigger concern to me is how will managers deal with the tight schedule? Will they decide? Some teams are going to decide, hey, I'm going to try to milk a guy for 8-9 innings and do it as I typically would in a normal baseball season. Other managers are going to take the approach of, let me try to modify the way I do things. Maybe I have a guy in for 5 innings, then I go right to the bullpen. So I think we'll have to learn a lot early in the season about how managers, we talk about this in football all the time, right? How coaches are such a big deal of our handicap. We don't really talk about that with baseball as much. I think we will this year.
Yeah.
Hey, Gill, I think, another angle that may come into play here is I think this first weekend is very important because let's face it, one sports book puts up a line and most of the other sports books all copy that. There's no one coming up with unique lines except for like Circa here in town or maybe a couple offshore sites or one offshore, and everyone copies that line. There's no originating sports book that's coming up with lines. So what do you think? I think this weekend may be some good opportunities for some guys that are more in tune to baseball to maybe get a little bit of an edge over the bookmakers.
No, I think that's true. And I will be honest with you, Bill, I never, ever paid attention to baseball exhibition games before in my life, preseason. But there's 3 or 4 days, I think it's 5 days total, of baseball exhibition games. And I am so locked into it in a way that I never have before, because I think you can actually learn a little this year where it's like, oh, this team actually does suck, right? Their lineup is horrific. And then another team, you're like, oh, they may appear to be terrible, but they actually have some life to them. So I do think that what you're saying is right. I actually think in a weird way, this is the one year you should be paying attention to these very few days before the season with preseason baseball or exhibition, whatever we want to call it, because I think the quicker you learn, the better. That window is going to close very quickly during the regular season.
Excellent.
Yeah. So lots of great baseball information, but I'm going to mess with you a little bit right now, Gill, because I'm going to talk a little bit about NFL. And I know that you are a huge fan of that Washington team. I'm a lifelong Cowboys fan. So we've got some issues, my friend, but it's all right.
It was fun while it lasted.
It was a good time. I enjoyed the moment. But you don't have a name right now. I want to find out, do you have a name that you'd like to see the Washington team become?
Yeah, Billy actually asked me about this on the show last week. When I was a kid, I didn't like the name. Like I was one of those kids that people can make fun of me now if they want, because I know people have their opinions on this. But I just at the at a young age was just aware that this probably shouldn't be the team name, and that was a very unpopular opinion at that time. You can imagine as a little pisher kid saying that. And I always thought that the name should be the Washington Power, because I just thought that made sense, and you could do all kinds of things with that. Obviously, that's not going to be the name. Nobody thinks that. Yeah, nobody thinks that's a good name, apparently. I don't want it to be like everybody's talking about the Red Wolves, which I was like, does not inspire me at all. I'm like, what is that? What? There's some thought about Red Tails, which is a tip of the cap to the Tuskegee Airmen. I think Daniel Snyder has hinted that he wants it to be part of, there has to be some military reference to it. So I really don't know. I mean, for me, it's sort of this weird thing. It's not a new issue for Redskin fans, for lifelong Redskin fans. It's even for those of us who get that the name must go. Mm-hmm. Between the Washington Bullets and our favorite football team growing up, our childhood is kind of gone. And so it is what it is. We grew up on different team names. I have a hard time liking the Wizards just because it's not what I grew up on. So we'll see if that happens. Listen, the Skins, the problem with the Skins is not real. I mean, beyond the team name, the owner is horrific. And, even in politics, people support both sides. There is not a single human being who seems to support this owner. He is universally hated by an entire fan base. And those allegations that came out last week, we were praying it would be enough to get him ousted from the league. So that's what we're really praying for.
Yeah. Do you think that that's going to happen? I mean, we've seen it happen in other sports. Do you think that they actually get Snyder to sell?
I don't know. I mean, I thought that there was going to be more to it. There's a whole bunch of rumors that there was going to be more to that. And obviously, I'm not in any way minimizing what the report was. There were 15 women who were accusing big players in the Redskins front office of sexual harassment. Yeah. But it didn't get to Daniel Snyder. And if you believe some of the insiders, the Redskins lawyers, Snyder's lawyers, really got a lot taken out of that piece. And so he might be Teflon. He might get through this. Though, I think, if Roger Goodell decided to make an issue of it and fellow owners did, sponsors certainly have, even before this with the name, they could make further noise with it. There's a way that it can get done. I'm just worried that it doesn't.
Well, I have seen that other owners are already saying that they want something done. So I don't know if, and I've heard a little rumor that Mr. Amazon, Mr. Bezos, is interested in buying the team. And we all know he's got enough money to do it. So
he does. And if you believe the conspiracy theory, he owns the Washington Post. That's why the article came out in the Washington Post, and it goes on and on. I'm just saying, look, sports, and this goes beyond sports, any good or bad organization in any walk of life starts at the top. And the Redskins could not be more rotten at the top. They'll never be good with him.
Yeah. I've got a good team name for you. Let me
All right.
tell me if you think about it. I was gonna tease you and say, how about the Washington Landrys, but
no,
how about the Washington Riggins?
Hey, the Hogs, you bring up Riggins. Hogs does have some support, the Washington Hogs. Yeah.
Cool.
Hey, I'm looking forward to another one. Well, do you have another question for him?
Yeah, I do. Hey, Gill, let me ask you this, Gill. Going back to some sports betting topic here. So do you agree with me where you really don't want to put a major portion of your bankroll or any even significant portion on these futures in any of these sports, by the way, NFL, MLB, NBA futures? I don't really like betting futures anyway because it's too heavy of a hold, but there is opportunities there. Of course, I will dabble a little bit, but because of this particular thing happening where there's shortened seasons, we don't know who's going to be playing. We don't know if they're going to stop playing. Don't you agree with tell me what you think about tying up your money on these particular futures?
Well, yeah, I agree. Like something with football, I've made like one or two football bets, and they have to do with Brian Flores as the coach of the year because the Dolphins are good. I think you get better odds on Flores as coach of the year than you would of the Dolphins getting anything as a team. So there's some strategy to that. But generally speaking, I agree with you completely. One, the NBA, you probably shouldn't be making futures bets even in like a normal season because only 2 or 3 teams can win it, and those odds aren't fun. And now I agree with you. Look, the books know what we know. It's not like we're the only ones in on the fact that these seasons are truncated, right? So the odds have been adjusted. Now, as you said, there are exceptions. I did find the Blue Jays at 200-1 about a month ago. So like something like that where I can work with it if they get to the postseason, that makes sense. But anything that's like 40 or 50-1, even in that range, like it's just, there's nothing to it. I want more bang for my buck from that. And look, it's still top heavy. The Yankees and the Dodgers and the Astros are still justifiably the favorites for a reason. So there are exceptions, but yeah, look, here's the thing. These things are starting, the NBA and baseball, but Billy, we don't know if they're ending, right? So it's like, why do you even want to mess with the possibility of having your money tied up in most of these situations? So yeah, like I won't even do college football on my show just because I think it's a waste of time. Right.
That sport is the least likely to come back. And, going back to what you said earlier, you brought up a good point about these teams having a shortened season. We touched on it earlier in our show, not going down from 160 some games down to 60 game season. So I think teams that you have to come out hot here. I was talking about this earlier. Listen, there's no time for slumps. Just like last year, the World Series champions, Washington came out with 19-31 in their first 50 games. If that happens again this year, they're not going to make the playoffs. So I think it's going to be all out kind of, let's just face it, it's going to be like playoff baseball from the start. So I love it. I love
agree.
Baseball.
I am more pumped for baseball than I am for basketball and hockey combined for that reason. And I think, the other way to look at it too, Bill, is if let's say you're the Tigers or a team that universally people agree isn't very good at baseball. And let's say you start out, 3-13. Are you just packing it in the rest of the way because you stink anyway, right? There's that too.
Just interesting. You can just let's go home to our families and let's get out of here and have that kind of a mental attitude. So that's a very good key there, Gill. That we'll have to look out for stuff like that.
Well, in all the sports, right? They're giving them the option to opt out of the season too. Not yet in the NFL, but in some of the other sports that they're offering the option to opt out. So I think that's going to do a lot for the futures and for, my world in fantasy, it does as well. And, when you talk about the shortened seasons of everything, when you think about the fact that in baseball, yeah, it's a 60-game season. That's like having a 5-game season in the NFL. You can't gauge anything by that. You cannot gauge anything. So, but you talked a little bit earlier about the Dodgers being like one of the favorites. So the news just came out that, speaking of bets, they're paying Mookie Betts 13 years, $380 million for his new contract. Does that make you lean Dodgers anymore?
No, I just think the Dodgers are so stacked to begin with. Betts certainly helps that, right? He's front and center of all that. I think the Dodgers are built like an American League team, meaning that now with the universal DH, the Dodgers, unlike most National League teams, won't miss a beat. They have players for days.
Yeah.
They're so deep. So I think to me, they're still the best team in baseball. I know Yankees and Astros fans will disagree. I took an over on their season win total. Yeah, the only thing I've bet in baseball, Blue Jays 200-1 to win it all, just because of the number. Blue Jays over, which I think I got at 26.5. The ticket's sitting in Vegas, so don't hold me to that, but I think that's the number I got it at. And then the Dodgers 37.5, because I do think the Dodgers are just going to. The Dodgers are going to be in so many casual bettors, money line parlays every single night. It's going to be ridiculous. That's how good that team is. So yeah, I mean, they're the not to get too inside baseball on this, but the reason that when they had interleague play, the reason that American League teams were so dominant in American League parks versus National League teams. Most people thought, oh, when American League teams go over to the National League parks, the NL will be dominant. Well, the real dominance was NL teams and AL parks. The AL was so dominant because the way that National League teams were constructed, because they have pitchers hitting, they didn't really have a ninth batter. It would be like a utility infielder, inserted into the ninth position. Teams like the Dodgers specifically and the Reds are built like American League teams. So I think they really benefit from this universal DH this year.
Fantastic. Well, listen, it was great having you, Gill. Appreciate you coming on. This was
thank you guys for having me.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for having me.
I want to close up by just saying, I'm a lucky girl right now because I am surrounded by two of the best. I was reading some tweets earlier, and people really, really love both of you so much. There was a tweet in particular that said, consumers like us need to rely on people like Bill Crackman and at Beating the Book to speak out and have outlets and give them an unfettered voice to do so. So thank you guys so much for doing that for the community. I know they appreciate it. Gill, we'd love to see you again someday.
Thank you, Rosalie. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you to both of you. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Gill.
So, Krack, another great interview with so much really, really good information. We have a lot of interesting characters that we've had on here, right?
Yes, there's I don't know if they want to be called characters, but Gill can be called a character.
Characters.
No, we really have some great guests, and like I said, I literally can have 20 more guests on here in a row that would all be very, very entertaining and very informative. So,
all right. So if you guys have missed any of our great guests too, I want to remind you can go back to our previous episodes of Wisecracks on the WSN Sports YouTube channel. They're all there for you, so you can go back and check them out. So next up, though, Krack, is your weekly pick, and I'm excited to see, with sports back, what you're looking at this week.
Well, I'll tell you, this is going to be a little bit of a surprise for everybody. I actually don't have a single weekly pick, but I'll tell you what, I think it's even more strong these first few days of baseball to simply write down the overnight line, because the lines for baseball come out the night before. Okay. So you just write down that overnight line, and what I'm talking about is the total line of every single game. So if there's 10 games being played in the day, you want to write down the total of every single game. And the next day, right before the first pitch is thrown, you want to see where that line went to. So if it was over 8.5, the first night, if it was 8.5, and then on the overnight line, then the next day you see it 9. Well, you know that the bettors, and especially the sharp bettors, which formulate and sharpen up the line, they're the ones that move that line for the most part. So some lines will go from overnight from 8.5 to the next day 9.5. So my tip to people is write them down, follow that line move, see where it goes, and track that. But not only track that, I want you to keep your if you listen, you're here to make money. So I want you to keep your eye on that live line, or even that there's plenty of 2-minute delayed services out there. It's free. Just Google line service, sports betting line services, and just know that maybe you want to jump on that when that line's moving that night, because the next day that line you'll have an edge over the closing line. That's what you want to be. It's called CLV. It's closing line value. So I think it's good. It's called really market handicapping also. Okay. So just this doesn't take any brains or any genius, any reading up on teams. Just follow the wise guys there a little bit. Follow the lines. I think that's a great tip, especially right now when baseball's first starting out. Let me tell you something. It's going to be so hard for the line makers to grasp everything that's going on here. We're going to have baseball and basketball. Then on a weekend, they're going to have to keep their eye on so many different sports. NBA, like I said, NBA, Major League Baseball, NASCAR, golf matchups, daily matchups,
NHL.
UFC, NHL, yep. And then you're going to have a real cross sport if we get college football in here in the NFL. Yep. So I really have to tell you, I think it's a good thing just to track these lines, see where they're going, and see if it does work out, and you can maybe do some market handicapping.
So that's interesting. And I just have a follow-up question to that. So check the lines the night before and see if you see them moving throughout the night before you get to the morning, right?
Right.
Okay.
So you want to look at the overnight line and the next day see where the closing line is, and keep your eye on that move that night. Keep your eye to see if it's working out for you. Because I think that a lot of there's only a couple of good baseball handicappers out there. I like to say that we are one of them. We have done well at baseball over the years. So I would just keep your eye on that overnight line, on that total, and see where it goes. And then again, if it sticks, if it goes from 8.5 to 9.5 and they score 10 or more runs, just know that trend's working, and maybe you should jump on that line move on the overnight lines.
Okay, so one quick follow-up question. How do I know that it's the sharps that are moving that line and not the squares?
Well, they're only going to move off the sharps because people, listen, let's face it, the bookmaker booking the bets normally knows they have so many accounts from A to Z lined up where they know, hey, that's a sharp guy betting this. Let's overmove that. So They know that. They already have the sharp guys figured out. So they know what accounts are which. Let's say account number 001, 002, 003. Well, they know 003, anytime he bets, the line moves in his favor, the closing line. So make sure whenever he bets, we move the line. Maybe 001 and 002, we don't even move on them because they're squares. But 003, he gets the money all the time for the most part. We're going to move on him.
Got it. So if you see them line moving, is there a particular direction you're looking for?
No, it can go either way. Either way. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
If you see it moving
over, under. I'm sorry?
If you see it moving heavily, then you're gonna go in that direction?
Well, most guys out there, you have slow-moving books. A lot of the books are kind of slow-moving books. So you want to follow the sharp sports books, maybe the Circus in town or the Westgate here in Vegas, the offshore lines, Pinnacle and Chris. You want to follow those lines, those 4 lines. There's also some other sharp books if you're looking on screens for, Dime Bet. There's these places that have really sharp guys that run the places. You want to really pay attention to their lines and maybe go with the slower moving books in town here, like Stations or Coast Casinos. That's Boyd, or even like a William Hill even. So you'll be betting those slow moving books because they're not really up to date, because the sharp guys mostly are getting thrown out of those books or limited those books. So they can't even get into those books. So.
Gotcha. And is this information you'd have on your app as well?
I write about it. Sure. My app, I write about the different stories on sports betting and my experiences and what I have done. So yeah, you could find out some information like that. Sure. Absolutely. You're going to find out the information. If you're going to be one of my subscribers, you're going to be getting that information. So absolutely.
Okay, good. All right. So that's a great tip. I like it. I like that it is about the strategy of what you're doing, and that I love that. I love that little edge. All right. So last segment of the show, which is obviously one of your favorites, because we're getting all these Twitter questions from you and we love them. Love them. So we're going to answer the questions from our viewers. Make sure to tweet us your questions for next week at WSN Sports, at Rosalie Michaels, or at Bill Crackman, and we will do our best to answer them. You ready to do this, Krack?
Yep.
All right, here we go. First question comes from 5 Minute Major. Should bettors be taking the new extra inning rule into account when looking at Major League Baseball's over-unders? We kind of touched on this a little bit before.
We did, but we could touch on it some more though for this particular person. Yes, just like I said earlier, you want to know who your one, you want to know who your relief pitchers are, but also you want to know the speed on the bases and who you have as far as in your lineup. So that's also important if you think a baseball game is going to be a close game, especially with a lower line where a game may be a pick 'em compared to a -180 or -200. So I think that that kind of covers that, and we've covered it earlier. So good. Thanks for the question.
Good question. All right. So from Jake Wins Bets, how will the cancellation of the preseason affect how you bet NFL Week 1? I know how it affects us in fantasy football land, but let's talk about sports betting.
Well, I'll just tell you, most people, the square public puts too much stock into preseason football. They'll see a team go 4-0 and 5-0. It's like, wow, this team really came out really good. Those same teams don't even make the playoffs sometimes. So this is a total different animal when you're talking preseason. And they're not having preseason this year. I do understand. But really, it doesn't affect it. Here's the reason why it affects me. I actually do very well preseason. I've been thrown out of sports books because I'm betting preseason bets, believe it or not. So it does affect my bankroll a little bit. But however, it really doesn't affect going into week 1, the actual playing of the games and stuff and the handicapping of the games, because you really can't go by preseason.
Do you think, I remember when we talked with Jay Cornegay a few weeks ago from Westgate, how they're kind of learning along the way too, right? We talked a little bit about that. So if you miss the Jay Cornegay interview, go back to see, I think that was week 2 we did, Jay.
2 or 3,
Yeah, so go back and see what he had to say about that too, and how they're going to be setting up those lines, because there's still some debate about that, right?
Yes. Oh yeah. There definitely is some debate. That was a good interview with Jay. So yeah, I recommend going back and listening to what he had to say that 15 minutes.
Yeah. All right. So let's go. Michael Harrison. He asks, ask Bill how he determines if there's value in a future.
Well, the futures market, I don't like I said earlier on a show, I really don't like to put a lot of money out there into the futures market. However, I will determine value by doing my line shopping, having every single sports book set up in order. And I'll actually, that house edge, which is ridiculous how much the house edge is on futures with a lot of the sports books. I'll actually look at one sports book, a team will be 8-1 to win let's say the World Series. I'll look at another sports book, the same team is 20-1. So that shows me value, knowing if I can get 20-1 on someone I may like, where it's 8-1 or 10-1 at some of the other sports books. So I'll always compare, and I'll even compare those the lines with the offshore, the sharper ones, and also like a place like Circa, which is the lowest hold in town on futures. So that's my answer to that. Really, you want to always keep Circa in your arsenal of sports betting and your futures bets, because they have the lowest household of any sports book that I know of. Anyway, so that's how I determine it. Really.
That's a great tip. So that's interesting. I think that would be a kind of a key indicator of when you're getting a really good line, right? If you see a bunch of sports books at one level and then you see one that's off like that by 20-1 as opposed to 8-1, that's a huge advantage. All right. So Josh Daly asks, Daly or Daly, sorry if I mispronounced your name, who is the sneaky MLB team to put a future bet on? Everybody's about the futures right now, Krack. To put a future bet on to win the World Series in the sprint season.
Well, listen, I'm not. I'm going to tell you right now, we don't even know if these seasons are going to come to a completion. So I'm not really for betting anyone or betting on these, even over-unders in football. I did bet, like I said earlier in the podcast, I bet under on the Bears, but I'm not so sure you should be tying up your money for a whole season betting any futures. But, I would look more towards the outlier teams that, like, maybe, who knows, maybe throw a bet on the Oakland A's or someone like that. I'm not looking to bet on the Yankees or the Dodgers, which everyone loves these teams, and bet on to win the World Series, because, like I said, you're tying up a percentage of your bankroll, and that money can have a bigger ROI, a bigger return on investment by betting on a daily or weekly basis.
It's like the difference between if you're going into a stock, right, that you're going to hold long term and let your money sit there, or do you want to dip in and out of stocks, right? Same kind of idea there.
Sure. I'm not a stock market guy. You have to be on the inside. You have to be on the inside. Like I'm on the inside with me and my Krack Wins team. You have to be on the inside to make money on Wall Street long term. I'm sorry. That's why I feel.
Well, that's all the time we have for our Twitter questions this week. I know we didn't get to all of you guys this week, but please keep sending those questions in. We love them. They're great. I love the different types of questions that we're getting from all of you. It's really, really important. And you know what? What a great opportunity, Krack. And thank you so much for being able to and willing to answer these questions for everyone. Not everybody has direct access to somebody like you. So
yeah, and sometimes my betting partners get upset at me because I give away too much information. But that's what I do. I try to help everyone. So I try to give these little nuggets of information. So we appreciate the questions. Thank you, folks.
Yeah, but that's why everybody loves you, Krack. So I want to thank you guys again for joining us this week for another episode of Wisecracks. And don't forget, please subscribe to WSN on YouTube to make sure you don't miss an episode of Krack's great tips and wise strategy sessions. And of course, join us next week for another sports betting deep strategy deep dive, another special guest, and more picks and plays from the Krack Man. We'll see you next week.